My sister got a Tesla. I got a rent invoice. And just like that, I realized love in this family had a price tag. The music in the backyard pulsed through the floorboards too loud for a weeknight, too celebratory for what it was hiding. I stood at the edge of the living room, one foot on the tile, the other still in the kitchen, watching the crowd chant my sister's name as she beamed under the string lights. Jessica was the center of everything, as always. Balloons arched in university colors, red and gold fluttered in the early summer breeze, and laughter spilled from the backyard like champagne foam. And there, parked in the driveway with a giant silver bow, was her brand new Tesla. Midnight blue, Model 3, still shining with showroom gloss. I remembered how growing up Jessica always got the first slice of cake, the new backpack, the louder applause. But this was something else. I held the ivory envelope Dad had pressed into my hand only moments earlier. No congratulations for my graduation a week before. No, we're proud of you. Just this. Inside a printout, a Venmo request followed by 3-line items. June rent, $800, July rent, $800, August rent, $800. A neat total of $2,400 typed in. Arial bolded and underlined at the bottom, due by May 31st. No signature, no note. I stood frozen right there in the doorway between the scent of grilled steak and Elaine's lemon-scented furniture polish. My fingers curled tightly around the envelope, creasing the paper. Jessica had squealed when Dad pulled the car keys out of his pocket like a magician performing a final trick. Everyone had clapped. Even Elaine smiled. I hadn't seen her smile in days. Dad's voice, loud and performative, had echoed through the backyard, because we believe in her potential. And we want her to start strong. Start strong. I wanted to laugh. Or scream. I had started strong too. I graduated magna cum laude from the same university a week ago. No party. No gift. Just a lukewarm dinner and the phrase, "You're independent now." I stepped back into the shadows of the hallway as the cheers outside swelled. In the dining room, wine glasses clinked, and Aunt Ruth was bragging about Jessica's summer internship at some PR firm in Boston. I could already hear her voice rehearsing the tale for next Thanksgiving. "Did you know she's getting a company car too?" I drifted into the kitchen, needing silence. The granite countertop was spotless, as if scrubbed with expectation. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I ignored it. I already knew it was one of those vague family group chat messages, Jessica's face probably posing next to the Tesla with a duck-lipped grin. I thought about confronting Dad, demanding why, asking if he remembered I paid part of Jessica's tuition my sophomore year when they forgot to cover it. Or the time I worked 3 jobs to keep the lights on when Elaine took sick leave and he cut back his hours without telling us. But what would that do? I walked past the hallway that led to the patio doors and stopped. Their voices were low, but the air vent above the pantry caught just enough for me to hear. "She's grown," Dad said. "It's time she starts contributing." Elaine didn't respond right away. When she did, her voice was weary. "Still, it's not the time for this. She needs to learn. Jessica is going places. Rachel needs a push." I closed my eyes. So that's what this was, a push. A polite eviction wrapped in a sheet of paper. My breath caught. Not in anger, not yet. In clarity. The kind of silence you get before a storm when you realize the thunder isn't coming, it's already been here. I turned and walked toward my bedroom. Every laugh that echoed from the backyard sounded faker than the last. Every clink of glass another reminder of what they celebrated and what they discarded. I didn't slam the door. That would have been a scene, and scenes were Jessica's currency, not mine. I opened my closet, slowly pulling the largest duffel bag I owned from the bottom shelf. I didn't own much, just enough to fill a few bags. Some books, some clothes, my degree rolled tightly in a protective tube. I left the rent bill on the desk under a paperweight shaped like a lighthouse. Fitting. I opened my phone and hesitated. Then I typed, "Rachel, can I crash for a few days? Maya always. Come over." I have beer and leftover pizza. My hands moved faster after that. I packed the laptop, the charger, a notepad filled with job leads and rejection letters. All the practical remnants of a life I had built quietly while Jessica got the spotlight and the safety net. There was no goodbye, no dramatic exit speech, no slamming cabinet doors, just the sound of a zipper closing on years of pretending I mattered the same. As I reached the front door, I paused. The air was cooler now. The music outside had shifted to some slow indie track Jessica probably picked herself. I could hear her laughing over it, carefree and light, as if nothing in the world could touch her. The last thing I saw before shutting the door was the Tesla's headlights flickering in the driveway, shining on everything I was leaving behind. Every single view means a meal for someone in need. Just by watching this video, you're giving warmth, hope, and a full plate to those less fortunate. So watch now, share now, subscribe to the channel, and let's spread love together. There are betrayals that scream, and there are betrayals that sit quietly in your mailbox, stamped and signed. The ceiling fan in Maya's apartment hummed steadily, offering a rhythm my pulse couldn't find. The space was small, barely room for her couch, a desk and the cluttered bookshelf near the window, but it breathed differently. Warm light from a Himalayan salt lamp pooled across the floor. An open pizza box balanced on the edge of the coffee table. A framed photo of Maya and her older brother sat slightly askew right next to a chipped mug full of pens. Nothing about this place was cold. Nothing was calculated. And yet, I sat stiffly on the couch, like I was still at the dinner table back home, waiting to be told I owed someone something. Maya handed me a mug of peppermint tea, her fingers brushing mine, grounding me with their quiet steadiness. "You want to talk about it?" "I'm fine," I said, which was a lie. And Maya knew it. She didn't press. Instead, she tucked her knees beneath her and reached for the remote. Something mindless played on the TV, two women arguing about a cheating boyfriend over dramatically loud music, but I wasn't really watching. My eyes were fixed on the manila folder in my lap. I had taken it on instinct last night, not even knowing what it contained. It had been tucked inside my old desk drawer beneath some expired college meal plan cards and old recommendation letters. A part of me didn't want to open it, because the moment I did, something would change. Something had already changed. I took a sip of tea and peeled the folder open. At first glance, it looked like paperwork from the bank. A few statements, some copies of forms, and an original trust document with my name printed in elegant serif font at the top. Rachel Louise Thomas Trust Account, EST 2009. Beneficiary unlocks at age 25. I remembered this. Grandfather had left it to me in his will, a fact the family mentioned once and never again. I'd been 16 when he passed. Jessica had cried at the funeral and clutched his watch like a trophy, while I stood beside the casket remembering how he taught me to change a tire. How he once told me quietly, "Don't let this family dim your light." The trust was supposed to be locked until I turned 25. I'd only just turned 24 last December. There shouldn't have been anything to see yet, but the account history said otherwise. I scanned the transaction page. 2019. Transfer 8,500 2020. Withdrawal 5,200 2021. Transfer $15,000 2021. Withdrawal 7,900 2022. Withdrawal $12,300. The list went on. And the amounts weren't small. They were calculated, spaced out, and never rounded like someone paying a bill or a tuition fee. These were deliberate extractions. And under the authorized by column, I froze. The first two said Douglas T., my father's signature in digital form. The third had a different name. Entirely. Elaine T. The fourth, Jessica Thomas. I blinked. That couldn't be right. I looked again, zooming in. No. There it was. Jessica had authorized a transfer from my trust fund. At 20, I remembered my own college application process. I'd asked for help with the SAT prep course, and Dad had said, "Use the free resources. It builds character." Meanwhile, Jessica had been gifted a private tutor with 2 master's degrees and weekly catered sessions in our den. Back then, I thought I was being dramatic. I thought maybe it was just budgeting. Now I knew better. The final entry on the page was the one that made my chest tighten. 2023. Balance, 147. The trust account was practically empty. I stared at the folder like it had just turned into a snake in my hands. The sound of a car horn outside brought me back. I looked up. Maya was watching me carefully. "Okay," she said slowly. "What's in the envelope?" I didn't speak. I passed her the transaction page instead. She read in silence. Her eyebrows lifted, then drew together. "Wait. I thought this was locked till next year." It was. She frowned. "That means someone either lied to the bank or someone changed the terms." My hands were ice cold. "I need to call someone," I said, standing. "An old family contact." "Who, Charles?" "He was our accountant. He handled the estate after Grandpa died. If anyone knows what happened, it's him." Maya nodded, already pulling up her own laptop. "Want me to look for his contact info?" "I have it," I said, pulling my phone from my hoodie pocket. I hadn't talked to Charles in years, but his number was still there, buried in old text threads with subject lines like Form 1099-R attached. I pressed call. He picked up on the third ring. "Hello, Charles. It's Rachel Thomas." A pause. "Rachel. Wow, it's been a long time. Everything okay? I need to ask you something about my trust account." A longer pause now. "I found statements," I said. "There have been withdrawals. A lot of them. Over the past 4 years." He sighed. "I see. Did you authorize any of that?" "No," he said carefully, "but I haven't been involved with the family's finances since your father transferred things to his new firm. But the trust," I began. Charles exhaled audibly. "Rachel, that account was drained 2 years ago. I thought you knew." I hung up. And for the first time, it wasn't just disappointment I felt. It was war rising in my throat. Dead men don't lie. But sometimes the living twist their last words to suit their own story. The sound of the printer hummed low and steady in the corner of Maya's apartment, slicing through the quiet like a blade. Outside, the streetlight flickered against the window pane, casting pulsing shadows across the cluttered kitchen table. Papers were everywhere. Statements, screenshots, envelopes torn hastily, notes scribbled in Maya's looping cursive. I sat cross-legged on one of the bar stool's laptop, open Gmail search bar blinking in front of me like a dare. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, just that something had always felt unfinished. Like there was a voice I hadn't listened to properly. A thread I had never pulled. My hands hovered over the keys and I typed instinctively, "Grandpa Thomas letter." At first, nothing. Then a subject line in my inbox from years ago, "FYI, saved from your backpack." It was from myself, dated March 17, 2011. I stared, then clicked. There it was. A PDF attachment no larger than a scanned page. It opened slowly, pixels sharpening into words I hadn't read in over a decade. My breath caught. "Rachel, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I don't know what shape the world will take, or what path you'll walk. But I've set something aside for you. For your future. Not to burden you, but to lift you when the rest of them try to drag you down. You're brighter than they see. Keep the light. Love, Grandpa." I stared at the words. Then again. Keep the light. 12 years ago, he had slipped a sealed envelope into my backpack while we sat on the porch swing. I'd thought it was just a sentimental note, another one of his quiet gestures. But I had opened it, scanned it, and then emailed it to myself. For safekeeping. I remembered that moment now like it had happened yesterday. Me cradled in his warmth, the scent of tobacco and pine on his flannel shirt, his hand on my shoulder and his voice low as he whispered, "One day this will help you do great things." And I had forgotten. buried it beneath everything else. School surviving home, surviving Jessica. Maya leaned over. Is that... it's from him? I rotated the screen so she could read. Her eyes flicked quickly, jaw tightening. Did you ever show this to your parents? No. I forgot it existed. She looked at me. This isn't just a sentimental letter. It sounds like he intended something legally binding. My thoughts had already started spiraling. I picked up my phone and dialed Charles again. He answered after a few rings. Rachel, I found a letter, I said. From my grandfather. A personal one. He references leaving something aside for me very intentionally, not just the trust. Silence. I waited. Charles' thought I pressed. Is there any chance there was a second will? He let out a breath that wasn't quite surprise. I vaguely remember something he admitted slowly. Your grandfather had drafted an addendum, a sealed document, about 6 months before he passed. He mentioned reallocating a portion of his estate. Said he wanted to make sure you had full rights to the Westbury bonds and the remainder of his antique collection. My chest tightened. What happened to it? I don't know. I was told not to process it. By who? A beat. Douglas. There it was. I leaned back against the chair, the plastic creaking beneath me. You're telling me, I said carefully, that my father suppressed an updated will and no one challenged it. I was just the accountant, Rachel. I wasn't the executor. And frankly, it wasn't my place to push. Your father made it very clear he had things under control. My fingers clenched. You didn't think I deserved to know, he sighed. I thought you knew. I assumed. Your mother would tell you eventually. I hung up before I could say something cruel. The printer beeped behind me. I turned, pulled the paper from the tray, and laid it flat on the table. Grandfather's words stared back at me in ink. This wasn't a misunderstanding, I said quietly. It was a cover-up. Maya ran a hand through her hair. You need a lawyer. I will. But first I need to know exactly how deep this goes. She studied the letter again. This could change everything. I nodded. It already has. When you step into a lawyer's office, you either walk out scared or ready to burn everything down. I chose the second. The lobby was narrow and clinical, more utility than grandeur, with linoleum floors that smelled faintly of lemon disinfectant and legal anxiety. A single ficus plant leaned toward a window that didn't open. The receptionist, a man with tortoise-shell glasses and the posture of someone who had read every bad Yelp review ever written, gestured silently toward a closed door marked Daniel O'Brien-esque. I adjusted the strap of my bag and stepped inside. The office was quiet, minimalist. No diplomas on the walls, just one framed photograph of a mountain peak disappearing into fog. Behind a simple oak desk sat Daniel O'Brien, the man Maya had called a lawyer who still gives a damn. He looked up from a stack of manila folders, his gaze assessing but not unkind. You're Rachel Thomas, he said. Not asked. I nodded. Thanks for seeing me on short notice. He gestured to the chair across from him. Maya said it was urgent. She wasn't exaggerating. He folded his hands. Tell me everything. From the beginning. And don't leave anything out, even if it feels small. I pulled the folder from my bag, Grandpa's letter, the trust statements, and the most damning document of all, the account activity page, with Jessica's name clearly printed under an unauthorized transfer. Daniel didn't interrupt as I spoke. I laid it all out: the party, the rent invoice, the folder I found, Charles's hesitant admissions. I even mentioned the second will, the one my father never filed. When I finished, Daniel sat back in his chair and exhaled slowly. You've got smoke, he said. But let's see if there's fire. He slid the papers across the desk, scanning quickly. This letter from your grandfather, it's emotionally persuasive but not legally binding on its own. However, he tapped the corner of the trust account statement. Unauthorized withdrawals are something else entirely. He looked at me. Did your father have power of attorney over your trust? I shook my head. Not that I ever signed. Doesn't mean he didn't file something. We'll need to check with the financial institution. If your name was on the account and those funds were used without your consent, especially by a family member acting in a fiduciary capacity, this could qualify as fraud. I swallowed. You mean like criminal, potentially. It's called fiduciary breach. And when money disappears from a trust fund like this, it often falls into that category. He tapped the PDF printout. Jessica's name here. That's even more complicated. If she didn't have legal authority and she's not listed as a co-beneficiary, it could implicate her too. Especially if your father helped orchestrate it. Maya leaned forward. What about the second will? Daniel nodded slowly. If your grandfather submitted it through the proper legal channels, there should be a record. But if your father intercepted it before it was filed... That's what Charles implied, I said quietly. Daniel's jaw tightened. Then we're looking at more than just financial abuse. This could turn into a probate challenge. But you need to understand something, Rachel. This isn't just about being right. It's about being relentless. I can be, I said. I don't doubt it. But lawsuits like this, they cost. Not just financially, emotionally. Your family will fight back. Hard. It won't be civil. They've never been civil, I said. And I meant it. He raised an eyebrow, then opened a drawer and pulled out a simple folder, this one labeled Intake Civil, Estate and Trust. Here's what happens next, he said. We start with discovery. I'll send formal requests to the bank, the estate attorney, and the probate court for any version of the will that was filed or blocked. We'll audit the trust account. Subpoena Charles if we have to. But I need your commitment. You'll be the face of this. You'll have to be ready. I am. He flipped to the last page and turned the folder toward me. Then sign here. Legal representation will begin the moment you do. The pen felt heavier than it should have as I gripped it. I didn't hesitate. I signed. It was the first thing in weeks that felt like it belonged entirely to me. Daniel closed the folder with a quiet click and locked eyes with me. Your father made the first move. Now it's your turn. I didn't just leave. I erased myself from their universe, and not a single person asked why. The cursor blinked on the screen like it was daring me to finish the sentence. The email was short, clinical, and direct. Nothing poetic. No grand declarations of betrayal or heartbreak. Just a series of precise sentences drafted with Maya's help, reviewed twice by Daniel. To whom it may concern, please consider this formal notice that I, Rachel Louise Thomas, am requesting to have my name permanently removed from any jointly held accounts, trusts, or lines of credit managed by or associated with Douglas T. or Elaine T. effective immediately. It wasn't anger that guided my fingers as I clicked send. It was clarity and relief. Maya sat across the table, sipping her tea, legs tucked beneath her. Her eyes tracked me, but she didn't speak, not yet. She'd seen me unravel over the past few days, pacing at odd hours, flipping through documents until dawn, drifting between sharp bursts of energy and long silences. Now I was quiet again, but not lost. I opened my phone. Jessica's name sat near the top of my message thread, still pinned like a priority that no longer existed. I typed 3 words. You knew, didn't you? Then I deleted them. I tried again. The trust is gone. Don't pretend this was Dad's idea alone. Delete. I settled on a single line. Don't ever contact me again. I hit send. No typing bubble appeared. No dots. Just the cold silence of delivery without acknowledgement. I should have expected that. I did expect it. The last time Jessica replied to one of my messages, really replied, was back in March, when she asked if I could Venmo her $60 for a hair appointment. I'll pay you back, she'd said. She never did. I checked my voicemail next. There was only one message waiting. Hi, sweetheart, it's Mom. I think we should talk. When you've calmed down. I know things looked one way, but families are complicated. You know your father just wants the best for you. let's not make this a bigger deal than it needs to be. Okay. Call me. Please. I didn't flinch. Not at the word calm, not at the way she said looked one way like I was hallucinating theft. I just pressed delete. And then, methodically, I went through my contacts list. Douglas Thomas. Block. Jessica Thomas. Block. Elaine Thomas. Block. I paused for half a second on Elaine. There was a time when I thought she'd fight for me. When I was 12, I'd stood outside the kitchen door listening to her beg my father to let me go to art camp. He said no. She said nothing after that. I kept waiting for her to make noise. She never did. Now she'd left a voicemail asking me to stay silent. Block. The phone felt lighter afterward, like it had been holding their weight for years. Maybe it had. I pulled out an old spiral notebook, faded green cover frayed at the edges, where I used to write poems in high school. I hadn't opened it in ages, but now I flipped to the last used page and scribbled in black ink. They don't get to rewrite the story. I underlined it once. Then closed the notebook. Maya re-entered the room holding 2 mugs of tea, her presence quiet but steady. She set one beside me and took the seat across the table. Ready? She asked. I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't just feel like someone who had been pushed out. I felt like someone who had stepped out on her own terms. I nodded. Let's burn a legacy to build a future. If the truth was buried, I had to be the shovel and the storm that unearthed it. The scent of old paper hit me first, musty, sharp, and unmistakable. It clung to the air like memory saturating the narrow hallway that led to Charles's private office. The walls were lined with metal filing cabinets from decades ago, some with peeling labels, others locked and forgotten. Dust motes hovered in the sunbeam that snuck through the only uncovered window. It felt like walking into a mausoleum of other people's secrets. Charles stood by the filing cabinet closest to his desk, his back slightly hunched, his fingers trembling more than they had the last time I saw him. Semi-retirement had not been kind to his posture, though something told me today's unease had less to do with age and more to do with me. I wasn't expecting you, he said, without turning around. I couldn't risk another half-answer over the phone, I replied. You said there was another will. I want to see it. He sighed a long, resigned breath and finally faced me. His eyes, pale and weathered, scanned my face like he was searching for the little girl he used to watch color outside the lines in his office corner while Grandpa handled finances. But I wasn't coloring today. I was demanding proof. There were 2 drafts, he admitted, walking slowly toward an old wooden cabinet behind his desk. The first, your father's copy, was filed after your grandfather passed. The second was never filed. Why not? He didn't answer until he had the cabinet open, his hand digging through folders like someone searching for absolution. Because Douglas told me it was a mistake draft. That Thomas had changed his mind. And he was the executor. I took a step closer. Did Thomas ever say that himself? No, he said softly. But your father, he was convincing. Or threatening. Charles didn't argue. After a few more minutes of silent shuffling, he pulled out a yellowed folder labeled in pencil, Thomas L. Alt. Rev. 2021. He handed it to me like it weighed 100 pounds. I opened it carefully, scanning the top of the first page. My name was there, in bold, listed as sole beneficiary of the trust and more executor heir to the Westbury bonds, and even a controlling interest in the family's old beach property in Narragansett. The language was clear, deliberate, not vague like some estate documents tried to be. This will had intent. But then I noticed the signature line. It was blank. My stomach dropped. It was never signed, I said. Charles nodded. But it was witnessed. See the initials here. He pointed to the bottom of the second page. That's mine. And that's one of Thomas's law clerks. He had every intention of signing it. So why didn't he? I think he was planning to make a formal event of it. He liked symbolism. Maybe he wanted to do it in front of the whole family. Make a statement. His voice cracked a little. But then, he had that stroke. My fingers flipped through the pages again, looking for something, anything that could explain why this version of the will had been buried. Then I found it. Clipped to the back page behind a paper protector was a note in handwriting I would recognize anywhere. Grandpa's. It was scrawled hastily on a folded note card, the kind he used to tuck into my lunchbox when I was a kid. Rachel. If they ignore this, let her remind them who she is. T. I stared at the ink. It had faded slightly, but not enough to diminish its power. His words didn't shake. Mine nearly did. I want a copy, I said. Charles didn't hesitate. He walked to the copy machine in the corner and began scanning the pages. As they fed through, he finally said, I kept it because I knew he meant for you to have it. I wasn't brave enough to go against Douglas back then. You don't have to be brave now, I replied, sliding the original documents back into the folder. Just honest. He handed me the copy as it printed page after page, sliding into the tray like the echo of a truth finally freed. I took it and walked toward the door. Maya was waiting in the car downstairs. Rain had started to fall light at first, then heavier with every step I took. Outside, the air smelled like wet pavement and old promises. I didn't run. I didn't shield the folder from the rain. I just walked, gripping it like it was fire. Sometimes you confront the enemy. Sometimes you check whether your sister is still part of the war, or just the reward. The cafe was all white marble tables and copper accents, like a showroom designed for Instagram. I spotted her before she saw me, Jessica, in a white sundress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, perched near the window with her phone angled high. She smiled at the screen, tilted her head, snapped, and reviewed. Her laugh didn't echo so much as hover in the air like perfume, present, artificial. I hesitated at the threshold. For a second, a much younger version of her replaced the woman in front of me. The Jessica who used to crawl into my bed after thunderstorms. The one who clutched my hand too tightly on the first day of kindergarten. Will you protect me? She had whispered once, shivering under our blanket. Always, I had promised. I stepped in. She looked up, blinked twice like I was a ghost, and then smiled wide. Rachel. Finally, I thought you bailed. She stood to hug me, but I sidestepped and sat down instead. Her smile faltered for a second but bounced back as she sank into her chair, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The silver bracelet on her wrist caught the light and glinted at me like a wink I didn't ask for. Happy graduation, I said flatly. She laughed. Thanks. Though honestly, the party felt bigger than the degree. I didn't answer. She waved over a barista and ordered an oat milk, something with caramel drizzle. I asked for water. Maya sat at the far end of the patio, headphones in, pretending to scroll her phone. She didn't need to hear anything, just to be close. Jessica was the first to break the silence. So, is this your way of saying sorry? I tilted my head. Sorry for storming out of the party. Dad was furious, by the way. I smiled, but it didn't reach anywhere near my eyes. I didn't come to apologize. Her fingers tightened on her cup. Then what is this? I need to ask you something. I kept my voice even. Did you know where the money came from? She blinked. What money? The Tesla? The party? The new wardrobe? The hair extensions? The spa package? I could keep going. Jessica let out a small scoff. Dad handles that stuff. I didn't exactly write myself a check. I nodded slowly. So you never wondered why you got luxury and I got rent? She leaned back in her chair. You're older. You've graduated. It makes sense. I stared at her. It makes sense that you get a car and I get an invoice. She shrugged. You always took things so personally. I swallowed the rising nausea. There was a second will, I said. Grandpa drafted it. It named me the primary heir. Sole control of the trust. The house in Narragansett. All of it. Jessica's face didn't change. Not even a blink. Charles found it, I continued. It was unsigned but witnessed. And clipped to it was a note. From Grandpa. For me. Then it wasn't valid, she said simply. It was meant to be, I snapped. Dad buried it. You benefited. Jessica stared at her drink like it held the answers. I didn't take anything, she said finally. It was given. That's the problem, I whispered. You never stopped to question why. She looked at me, then really looked. You're blowing this way out of proportion. I spent years thinking I was ungrateful, I said. That I was bitter, dramatic, difficult. But this wasn't a misunderstanding, Jess. It was a theft. You just stood there and smiled for pictures while they stole from me. She rolled her eyes. God, Rachel. Do you even hear yourself? I did. And I sounded exactly like someone who'd finally woken up. Goodbye, Jessica, I said, standing. As I picked up my bag, she leaned back and crossed her legs, a tiny smirk forming. If you need money, she said, you could just ask. My father taught me to be patient, but he forgot I was also learning when to strike. The folder sat on Daniel's desk like a loaded weapon. Neatly clipped pages, high-resolution scans, annotated lines. Each sheet a piece of the truth we were assembling. I had spent the last 3 days printing, highlighting, and cross-referencing every document from the trust file, the fake billing statements, and most damning of all, the unsigned second will with my grandfather's handwriting still crisp in the margin. No legacy is safe from silence, but truth makes a damn good hammer. That line had been circling in my head since I found Thomas's letter. Now it wasn't just an echo. It was a call to arms. Daniel leaned back in his chair, hands folded behind his head, as I handed him the USB drive with the updated files. You've got a sharp sense for documentation, he said, scrolling through my folder hierarchy. You said I needed to think like a litigator, I answered. Looks like you listened. Maya had converted her dining table into what she called the war room, legal pads. Sticky notes and color-coded timelines were spread across it like battle plans. I'd barely eaten or slept, but for the first time in years, my exhaustion felt earned. Daniel tapped a few keys. So, today's the day we start pulling teeth. He was referring to the formal request we were filing, a legal demand for full accounting of the trust's financial activity over the last 5 years. It was step 1 in forcing Douglas into the light. If he refused, we could subpoena records. If he complied, we'd sift through the dirt ourselves. Let me show you the draft, he said, turning the screen toward me. I read each line carefully. The language was precise, clinical. But beneath it ran a current of confrontation. By filing this request, I wasn't just asking questions, I was accusing. This looks solid, I said. Good, he replied. Saving the file. But we're not done yet. I knew what came next. Back at Maya's apartment, I sat at the table alone while she worked in the other room. I opened my laptop, pulled up my email, and stared at the blank message. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted every word to slice like a scalpel. To Douglas Carter, subject. Regarding the Thomas L. Carter Trust. Dear Dad, I've attached scanned copies of the second will drafted by Thomas Carter and the note he left for me. I believe you've seen both before, despite never acknowledging them. Additionally, you'll find financial records showing activity in the trust prior to my 25th birthday, which was not disclosed to me nor legally authorized. Please consider this a formal notification that I am initiating legal review of your role as executor and trustee. Rachel, I read it twice. Changed nothing. Hit send. Daniel responded within minutes of receiving a copy of the email. You'll never guess what he replied, he said, calling rather than texting. Tell me. He cleared his throat and read, You misunderstand everything. We'll resolve this properly. That's it. That's it. I blinked. So he's not denying anything. Exactly. Daniel said. He just admitted he had it. Not in so many words, but legally. That's big. He acknowledges the existence of a conflict. I sat down, the weight of that realization settling over me. All my life, I thought fighting back meant yelling louder or stomping off, but sometimes fighting meant collecting facts, being deliberate, and forcing someone to speak on record. At noon the next day, I sat across from Daniel again as he placed the legal complaint in front of me. The file bore my name at the top, Rachel Carter versus Douglas Carter, and underneath the charge breach of fiduciary duty. Once you sign, he said, handing me a black pen, it becomes public record. This isn't just about money anymore. I know, I said. It never was. I signed. He flipped the pages, checked each line, then stood up. Let's file it. We drove downtown together. The courthouse was quiet, sterile, filled with people fighting battles I couldn't see. Daniel handed the folder to the clerk, who stamped the front page, then filed it away. Now it's real, he said. I nodded. Let's see how well he sleeps. When you tell your story, they either listen or try to break your voice. I chose to shout louder. The light from Maya's laptop glowed across the kitchen table, illuminating the chaos of what we'd just unleashed. On the screen was the article. Bold title, red italics. My story, but without my name. The inheritance that wasn't hers. A feature by Avery Brooks. It had started as a quiet message, just a cautious, "Hey, would you be willing to listen?" sent from Maya's phone. Avery had replied within minutes. She still remembered me from college, still hated institutional power, and still had access to her editorial desk at the Providence Herald. That's all we needed. I won't use your name unless you want me to, she'd said over speakerphone. But this deserves oxygen. The article dropped on May 30th. By midnight, it had been reposted to Medium, then linked to Reddit threads about financial abuse, estate fraud, and family betrayal. Someone tweeted a screenshot of the final paragraph. She was told she'd inherit stability. Instead, she got silence, debt, and a bill for the truth. It caught fire. I wasn't ready for how many people saw themselves in it. Comments rolled in like waves. This happened to my aunt. My mom drained our college fund the same way. Protect your story. They'll gaslight you if you let them. But not all the voices were kind. Anonymous accounts accused me of seeking attention. Men with golf course avatars told me I should be grateful for anything I got. One woman replied, "Family matters should stay in the family." Shameful. I knew better than to respond, but it still left a mark. And then came Jessica. She didn't message me, of course not. She tweeted, "Some people need attention more than justice. No name, no mention." But everyone who knew us could read between the lines. The comments under hers were brutal. Sounds like guilt. Let me guess, Tesla sister. I wanted to hate her for it. But mostly, I felt nothing. She was just doing what she'd always done, surfing on silence, pretending the current wasn't hers to fight. Back at Maya's apartment, I watched the story spread from one tab to the next. Hashtags, comments, anonymous DMs. My phone vibrated nonstop. Some were supportive, some weren't. One simply said, "You're going to regret this." By the next morning, I had my answer. An email pinged my inbox at 8:12 a.m. The subject line read, "Cease and desist. Defamatory content." It was from a firm I didn't recognize, but the name inside was familiar: Douglas Carter. The letter accused me of misrepresentation, libel, and reckless disregard for reputational damage. It demanded immediate takedown of all defamatory materials, both on my part and via associates or representatives, or I'd face legal action. I stared at it for a long time, then forwarded it to Daniel. His reply came in the form of a single PDF attachment. The cover page: Rachel Carter vs. Douglas Carter, breach of fiduciary duty filed. May 28, 2023. Beneath it, a single sentence from Daniel. They wanted to make this legal. We already did. I exhaled. Later that evening, I sat with Maya, scrolling through another thread dissecting the article. Some users speculated that Jessica was the younger sister, not the older one. Others were debating whether trust funds were even real. None of it mattered. Not anymore. Maya poured me tea, the mug steaming between us. "Still glad you did it?" she asked. I didn't hesitate. If they wanted this quiet, they should have paid me to stay silent. There are knocks you wait for. This one wasn't one of them, but I welcomed it like an old enemy. It came at 7:42 a.m. Not a pounding knock, no. This one was polite, deliberate. A sound dressed in gray wool and court-certified silence. Maya was still half asleep in the other room. I opened the door. "Rachel Carter," the man asked. He didn't look up from his clipboard. "Yes?" He handed over a thick envelope. "You've been served. Good luck." Good luck. Like I'd bought a lottery ticket, not filed a lawsuit against my own blood. The envelope felt heavier than paper had any right to. I turned it in my hands. No wax seal, no dramatic gold lettering. Just a stack of brutal truth printed in Times New Roman. Inside, a formal court summons. Plaintiff, Rachel Carter. Defendant, Douglas Carter. Charge: breach of fiduciary duty, suppression of inheritance documents, unlawful trust manipulation. I read it once, then again, and again. No emotion, just the shape of inevitability taking legal form. Maya emerged from her room wrapped in a hoodie, rubbing her eyes. "That the mail?" "No," I said. "That was the beginning." We didn't speak much on the way to Daniel's office. The wind outside was sharp, tugging at my hair like it wanted to remind me I wasn't dreaming. I held the summons like it might fly away if I didn't grip it tight. Daniel had cleared his schedule. "Congratulations," he said dryly when I laid the papers on his desk. "You're now officially inconvenient." He flipped through the documents quickly, annotating with a blue pen, his mouth twitching between satisfaction and calculation. "They're playing defense already. Look here, line 18. They're framing your public statements as emotional misinterpretation, not denial. That's important, because it means they know the paper trail is real. They're going to argue intention, not fact, which is weaker, but messier." We spent the next 2 hours going through logistics. Court date set for June 16th. Evidence prep. Witness possibilities. "Charles is maybe," Daniel said. "He's skittish, but if we subpoena him, he'll fold." Avery. "She won't testify, but her article is public record. We'll use it to show motive and public interest." Jessica. Daniel sighed. "Legally useless. Morally fascinating." I didn't disagree. At noon, a press release dropped. A single paragraph from Douglas Carter's legal team. "Our daughter is understandably confused. This is a private family matter. We intend to resolve it respectfully and without spectacle." I read it aloud in Daniel's office. Maya scoffed. "Respectfully," she said. After stealing a six-figure inheritance, Daniel leaned back in his chair. "That's the narrative they'll push. You're a confused girl. They're the calm adults. Our job is to make that story crack." I signed 3 more documents, one for court filing, one confirming public disclosure permissions, one granting Daniel full representation in civil proceedings. The final form shook slightly under my pen, but I signed it anyway. No turning back. We exited the building around 3. The city was still its usual noise: cars honking, a baby crying somewhere, a man selling roasted peanuts on the corner. I stood at the curb for a second, just listening. Then I whispered it to myself. Not loud, not dramatic, just clear. They'll call me the problem, but I'll be the precedent. They showed up in matching suits and practiced smiles. I showed up with the truth and a damn good lawyer. Family court in Providence was never meant for a crowd like this. The hallway buzzed with murmurs, iPhones lifted discreetly, press badges clipped with too much pride. Reporters clustered at every turn, hungry for the kind of story that tasted like betrayal and bloodlines. Maya squeezed my shoulder as I adjusted the cuff of my blazer. My grandfather's wristwatch felt heavy on my left arm, but its weight steadied me. I wasn't walking into this courtroom alone. Douglas entered flanked by Elaine and Jessica, all three wrapped in muted navy blues, their faces taut with composure. Douglas nodded once toward the judge's bench like an old acquaintance, then swept his eyes across the room, stopping when they landed on me. I didn't look away. Judge Carson, silver-haired and slow-blinking, took the bench with a gavel knock that silenced every side glance and throat clear. Docket 387C, Rachel Carter v. Douglas Carter et al. Parties present Daniel O'Brien for the plaintiff, Your Honor, Daniel said. Rising. Robert Klein for the defense, said the opposing lawyer, a man who looked like he'd ironed his spine. The judge gestured to begin. Daniel didn't posture or dramatize. He simply stepped forward with one hand resting on the edge of the table. This is a case of betrayal not only of blood, but of law. My client, Rachel Carter, was stripped of her rightful inheritance, misled about her financial assets, and manipulated into silence through omission and deception. Today, we begin the process of restoring not just money, but trust. Klein followed with something colder. The plaintiff is tragically under emotional distress. Family disputes over money are unfortunately common, but this story, Your Honor, is steeped in misunderstanding, not malice. We will show that any confusion arose from legal ambiguity, not misconduct. My hands clenched under the table. Legal ambiguity. I took the stand briefly that morning. The courtroom didn't breathe. I spoke calmly, measured, almost detached. I explained the trust account, the withdrawals, the second will unsigned but witnessed. The letter from Thomas Lynn, my grandfather, now sitting in an evidence folder beside the court stenographer. Daniel guided me through. No drama, just facts. After 10 minutes, the judge asked for a recess. I'll need to review full documentation before approving extended testimony. Fine. What mattered came next. Charles was called not as a formal witness yet, but to verify a preliminary statement. He rose from the back, looking smaller than I remembered. Retirement had pulled his posture inward. Yes, he said when asked if he was the accountant of record at the time the original trust was executed. Yes, he confirmed there had been talk of a second will. Yes, again, he had been told not to submit it for review. By whom? Daniel asked calmly. Douglas Carter, Charles said, and the courtroom inhaled as one. Judge Carson turned to the bench clerk. Mark that for formal witness scheduling. Then Daniel submitted the letter. The real one. My grandfather's. Handwritten. Dated. Tucked away for years like a grenade. Let them know you were never just the quiet one. The judge read it in silence. The gallery murmured. A few gasps cracked the air. Douglas shifted in his seat, jaw grinding. Elaine kept her eyes lowered. Jessica was still, but her hand crept up to her necklace and tugged just once. We recessed again before lunch. The courtroom emptied, slowly, buzzing like an exposed wire. I stood to leave Daniel beside me. Douglas didn't move, but his eyes found mine again. This time they didn't hold smugness. They held calculation. And behind that, something that looked like fear. I didn't blink. He knows what's coming next. So do I. When the truth starts unraveling, the liars pull tighter, but they strangle themselves first. Day 2 of the hearing opened with silence heavier than the judge's gavel. The courtroom wasn't just full, it was tense electric. Cameras had been banned, but the whispers of reporters behind me felt like live wires. I kept my eyes on the table in front of me, but I could feel Douglas watching me, his posture straighter than yesterday, but his jaw clenched like a man holding a crumbling wall with bare hands. Daniel stood calm and clear. We'll begin with Mr. Carter's continued testimony. Douglas walked up like a man returning to the pulpit. He spoke confidently, too confidently. But Daniel, like clockwork, began to slice through his version of the truth with the elegance of a practiced surgeon. Mr. Carter, you claimed under oath that the first disbursement from Rachel Lynn's trust occurred in January 2023. Is that correct? Douglas nodded. That's correct. Daniel raised an eyebrow, flipped through a folder, and held up a document. This is a bank transfer from August 2021. It's marked as a withdrawal from the trust into an account ending in 00472. Is that account under your name? Douglas paused. Yes. But that was a temporary measure. Was it authorized by the beneficiary? She didn't need to authorize it. She wasn't of age. Daniel turned to the judge. And yet, Your Honor, the trust was structured to restrict access except by fiduciary responsibility, and the defendant violated that. I didn't move. But inside my chest was burning. He had lied. On record. Under oath. Jessica was next. She entered the stand like it was a red carpet, eyes flicking around for sympathy that wasn't coming. Her voice was light, airy. I didn't know the money came from Rachel's trust. My dad just helped me. I thought it was from our joint family savings. Daniel stepped forward. Ms. Carter, are you aware of the Venmo transactions made to your account from the same trust ending in 0472? Her face tightened. I don't remember. We do. He handed copies to the judge. Timestamps align with the purchase of your Tesla. The same week, the trust was tapped again. Jessica's eyes darted toward our father, then down at her lap. She didn't speak again. Elaine followed unsteady on her feet. Her hands trembled as she held the Bible to swear in. She didn't meet my gaze once. Mrs. Carter, Daniel said gently, were you aware of the second will written by Thomas Lynn Marshus? She hesitated. I heard my husband mention something, but I was told it wasn't valid. By whom? She looked at Douglas. By him. And when Rachel asked you last week to speak, you left a voicemail that said, let's talk when you calm down. Was that based on your knowledge of the financial situation? Elaine's lip quivered. I didn't know how deep it went. Her voice cracked. I thought it was a family issue. Not this. Daniel handed her a copy of my grandfather's letter. She took it like it burned. This is what he wanted, I said softly from my seat. Elaine's shoulders shook. For a moment she looked like a woman finally realizing the fortress she'd lived in was made of mirrors. Then came the blow. Daniel returned to Douglas. Earlier you testified that you had never seen a second will. Is that still your position? It is, Douglas said firmly. Then how do you explain this email? He held up a printed message, dated May 25, 2023, from my father to his lawyer. It read, Rachel is misinterpreting the second draft Thomas gave us. It was never legally filed. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The judge narrowed his eyes. Mr. Carter, you testified under oath that you had no knowledge of a second will. Now this correspondence suggests otherwise. Douglas shifted in his seat. That was a misunderstanding. The draft wasn't formal, but it existed, and you just admitted it. The judge leaned forward, voice cold as steel. We may be dealing with more than civil breach here, Mr. Carter. Silence. Then pen scratches. Then the sound of public reputation cracking. Douglas turned pale. Elaine stared at her lap. Jessica looked away from us all. I looked at Maya in the back row. Her jaw was tight, her phone in hand, probably already typing to Avery. This wasn't over, but something had changed. The judge leans forward. We may be dealing with more than civil breach here, Mr. Carter. It didn't feel like justice. It felt like air after suffocation. The courtroom was quieter than it had been all week. Not because fewer people came, if anything, the gallery was more crowded, more breathless, but because the ending had arrived, and endings, even the victorious ones, tend to hush us. My hands rested still in my lap. I didn't fidget. I didn't glance at my family. I didn't look to Daniel. I looked straight ahead at the judge, at the bench, at the space between who I used to be and who I would never be again. Judge Carson cleared his throat. in the matter of Rachel Carter v. Douglas Carter regarding fiduciary breach, financial misappropriation, and trust suppression, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff. I didn't exhale. The second will, though unsigned, meets the requirements of a witness testamentary document and is admissible as intent under Rhode Island succession law. The trust account was misused. Funds were withdrawn without transparency or consent. Mr. Carter is hereby removed as trustee. Still, I didn't move. Restitution is ordered in the amount of $1.48 million. Further recommendation is made to the Attorney General for criminal inquiry into the respondent's financial conduct. A hum swept the room like wind across the surface of something newly broken. Douglas's face didn't fall. It cracked. Not visibly. No, he was too proud for that, but in the way his mouth stopped trying to shape a narrative. In the way he folded his hands together not as a show of strength, but as a shield from the sentence that had just been handed down. I looked at him finally. He didn't meet my eyes. Jessica sat behind him still as a statue phone clutched in one hand, unreadable expression on her face. Elaine dabbed beneath her eye with a handkerchief, though her cheeks weren't wet. They didn't look at me, and I didn't expect them to. Daniel leaned closer, whispering, "We did it." But I didn't nod. I didn't smile. It wasn't relief that washed over me, it was something quieter, something weightless, like a knot untied in the center of my chest but not quite gone. The judge adjourned the court. People stood. Reporters moved like heat-seeking devices, scribbling recording scanning expressions. Daniel packed up documents with methodical precision, like a man putting away scalpels after surgery. Maya offered me a small smile from the second row, her eyes glassy. She had been here every day, every moment, my constant signal fire in the fog. Still, I didn't move until the last page was in the folder. Then I stood. The courtroom rose around me like a tide. I didn't speak to Jessica. She didn't stand. Elaine turned slightly in my direction, whether it was instinct or apology I couldn't tell, but she said nothing. I walked past them like I was walking out of a museum exhibit I had already seen too many times. Outside, the media surged like a wave crashing onto shore. Microphones extended. Cameras clicked. A question broke through the crowd. "Rachel, how do you feel?" I paused only long enough to make sure they heard me. "It's over." I kept walking. The breeze hit my face before I reached the courthouse steps. It was cool and clean, as if the air knew I needed something new in my lungs. I inhaled slow, deep, final. Then my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number. But the message was short, plain, and pierced through the noise around me. "I'm proud of you." I stared at the screen for a beat longer than necessary. It could have been Avery. It could have been Charles. It could have been someone else entirely. But somehow it felt like more than that. Maybe it was the past nodding quietly, or maybe it was the future already unfolding. No one tells you that after the storm, the silence feels suspicious. The world didn't collapse after the verdict, it simply kept spinning. Cars still honked, mail still arrived, baristas still asked for names on cups. But to me, everything sounded muted, like I was underwater watching the surface ripple above. Maya's apartment, once my war room, had become a sanctuary again. The folders were gone, the highlighters and court transcripts packed into boxes. The whiteboard we'd used to track tactics had been wiped clean. I left one phrase scribbled in the corner, though, in fading red marker. "We don't fight to be loud, we fight to be heard." The first week after the ruling, I barely left the apartment. Not because I was afraid, just hollow. Like I'd been holding my breath for too long and didn't quite know what to do with air again. I spent mornings with tea instead of tension, afternoons scrolling through grad school websites, nights journaling in silence, the kind where no one interrupts, because finally, they can't. One day, Maya caught me staring at the screen halfway through a personal statement for Columbia's public policy program. My fingers had frozen over the keyboard. What if I only know how to fight? I asked. She sat beside me, curled legs and all heart. Then fight for someone else next time. I laughed. I didn't mean to, it just slipped out. Not a big one, just enough to prove I could still feel something that wasn't grief or rage. That same afternoon, a package arrived. No return address, just my name in old-fashioned script. Inside a letter carefully folded and a personal check. Rachel. There's no apology strong enough for what I allowed to happen. I believed I was protecting the legacy, but I failed the person it was meant for. This won't undo what was done. But consider it a gesture from someone who should have spoken sooner. Charles. The check was for $10,000. I stared at it for a long time, not because I needed the money, but because it was the first time anyone from that world had admitted fault without conditions. I slipped the letter into my grandfather's notebook, the same one he gave me years ago, the one with the loose ribbon and the faint scent of cedar. The check I tucked into an envelope labeled "Start Over." A few days later, I called Avery. She answered on the second ring. I figured I'd hear from you soon. I owe you more than thanks. You owe me coffee and a quote for the follow-up piece. I smiled. Maybe next week. Whenever you're ready, she said. Don't rush the exhale. I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I packed a small bag and took the bus to the edge of the city. There was a park I hadn't visited in years, one with a rusted swing set and a bench under a tree, with bark like wrinkled skin. My grandfather used to bring me here after school. We'd sit, eat soft pretzels, and talk about everything and nothing. It was quiet when I arrived. The wind moved through the branches in long, deliberate sighs. I had the court documents in my bag. Not all of them, just the summary, the ruling, the final seal. I sat on that old bench and read it aloud, one page at a time, like I was telling a story that mattered. When I finished, I took off the wristwatch, his watch, the one I'd worn into court every day, like armor. I held it in my palm for a long time before placing it gently on the stone edge of the nearby memorial garden where he was buried. I didn't want revenge, I whispered. I wanted release. It was true. Not a performance, not a declaration, just a statement finally untangled from anger. The sun shifted behind a cloud, shadows stretching across the grass like arms reaching to be remembered. I stood slowly, brushing dirt from my jeans. I didn't win because I fought. I won because I remembered who I was. Every single view means a meal for someone in need. Just by watching this video, you're giving warmth, hope, and a full plate to those less fortunate. So watch now, share now, subscribe to the channel, and let's spread love together. They wanted me to beg to come back. I built a life they couldn't enter. The key slid into the lock without hesitation. The door gave with a soft click. No dramatic creak. No sudden gasp of air like in the movies. Just the beginning of quiet, unremarkable ownership. Mid-July in Providence was humid enough to soften even the edges of excitement. But I didn't need fireworks or ribbon cutting. I had a one-bedroom walk-up with sun-warmed hardwood floors and a chipped windowsill that faced east. And it was mine. Not gifted. Not borrowed. Not owed. Signed and sealed with the kind of freedom no courtroom verdict could guarantee. I stood in the center of the apartment, cardboard boxes forming a cautious perimeter. The space still smelled faintly of plaster and fresh paint. A single lamp sat on the floor beside me. I turned it on not to see better, but to watch how the light filled the room. My name was on the lease. The down payment had come from my reclaimed inheritance, routed through a clean account, legal and untouchable. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something softer, settled, sufficient. No one had asked where the sofa should go. No one had reminded me to leave space for someone else's preferences. I unpacked my books alphabetically, not out of compulsion, but choice. I placed a photo of my grandfather on the kitchen shelf beside a small basil plant Maya had given me weeks ago. The phone pinged just before lunch. Subject: Hey from Jessica.Carter@email.com. Rachel, I know a lot happened. I'm sorry if it felt unfair. Things got messy. I hope we can talk sometime. Maybe clear the air. Jessica. I didn't read the rest. I didn't need to. The tone was familiar. Calculated regret without accountability. An olive branch without roots. I hovered over the screen for only a second before pressing delete. They always assumed I'd come back eventually. That I'd want to, even after everything. But I'd spent so long trying to prove I belonged inside their version of family that I never stopped to ask if I wanted to. Now I had my answer. Maya showed up later that afternoon balancing a bouquet of sunflowers and 2 iced coffees in her arms. She nudged the door open with her foot. For the house that you built, she said, holding out the flowers like a trophy. I took them and laughed. I think you mean the shoebox I now legally occupy. Don't downgrade it. It's the Palace of Peace. We sat cross-legged on the floor, sipping our drinks, the only furniture, a couple of pillows, and the rolled-up rug I hadn't laid out yet. The conversation drifted: travel plans, possible graduate programs, her dating disasters. For the first time in months, none of it felt like escape. It felt like life. Like living. Later, after she left, I opened the last box, my journals. The same leather-bound one I'd written in during the trial. I flipped past entries stained with resentment and adrenaline, past late-night thoughts sharpened by betrayal. And then I wrote, "They're begging now, but not for me. For a version of me that never existed. I don't miss her either." I closed the journal and slid it under my pillow. The sun had dipped behind the buildings outside, casting long amber shadows across my living room floor. I stood and walked to the front door. For a moment, I paused with my hand on the handle, listening to the silence inside. It was the kind of silence I'd once feared, one without validation, without audience. But now it felt like something I had earned. I turned the lock. She closes the door to her new home. We don't know what's next, but it's finally hers.